Hello everyone, this is Anna. Welcome back to my channel. I'll be your hostess for the hour. What can I get for you? Oh god, that kind of fucking happiness I can't deal with. Hey, what's up? So as you have probably already deduced by the title and by the thumbnail, if I do remember to edit it accordingly, I'll be talking to you guys about The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas in collaboration with Auguste Maquet, or as I recently have loved to call it, my favorite book of all time. I think that 2 or 3 videos I've already made on this channel touch upon this book on one shape or form. Not to mention that the only 24-hour readathon I have thus far on this channel is completely dedicated to it. 99% sure that you have heard of this book in high school or in a must-read classics list, but if you don't know what it is about, in 1815 France, we follow 19-year-old Edmond Dantes as he is accused of a crime he didn't commit and locked away for 15 years. He loses his bride, his very promising career, his dad, and, well, basically all of his old life. Revenge is the strongest theme in this book as we find out that Dantes becomes filthy rich and very slowly takes revenge upon those who made him suffer. Interesting premise, long-ass ride. If you come by the abridged version, I'm pretty sure you'll get to read around 500 pages or so, but I swear that it is worth reading this 1,000-paged monster for literally everything there is. It is definitely worth your time. I read this book in Spanish as that's my mother tongue. You know, when it comes to romance languages, I prefer to read in Spanish because it is a lot easier to understand the contents of the book as it was originally written, rather than jumping all the way to English, which is just entirely different etymology. You know what I mean, right? This video will be split into 3 sections. First, the spoiler-free review in case you want to read this book for yourself. Second, the discussion in case you have already read the book or you don't really care to be spoiled. The third section, which is the movie review. So I'll be reviewing these 2 movie adaptations and we'll be comparing it to the source material, as well as having individual reviews for each, and I'll just be discussing them, what I liked and what I didn't like of each movie. So without further ado, I say we get started, shall we? Part 1. The spoiler-free review. I want to talk about the length first. So as the very responsible reader I am, before I started writing my own review, I checked out a lot of those on Goodreads, and the ones that I was the most interested in were the lower rating ones. Obviously, since I really love this book, my first thought was, who the hell in their right mind would give this masterpiece a 1-star rating? And most importantly, why? That way I can address it in the video, because I get that this book is not for everyone and not everyone will like it, and I like to give you guys a heads up on what you might potentially not like about this book. Most, if not all, of the reviews that were this low were complaining about the length and about the middle chunk being extremely boring and not leading up to anything, being a bunch of small talk that wasn't really contributing to the story at all. I can definitely see why people would think that, but let me take it from here, shall we? Originally, The Count of Monte Cristo was published in 1844 in 18 parts and throughout 2 years, as it was then serialized into, again, 18 books. It was part of a weekly newspaper run which were very popular in France. It was published in the Journal of Debates, which had seen just as much as Edmond Dantes had at this point. The Bourbon Restoration, Napoleon's 100 Days, the Second Restoration. Normally, stories submitted to be published as feuilletons or newspaper serials would touch upon the subjects of romance, adventure, mystery, overall truly fantastic and psychological works. Of course, Monte-Cristo had to have the drama and the appeal to have readers coming back every time a new chapter was published, every single week. Consider it to be a written soap-opera. For the not leading up to anything part, that is extremely debatable. In my opinion, the entirety of the novel serves purpose for setting up Edmond's revenge. For example, the Italy chunk of the novel serves to establish Monte-Cristo's relationship with Albert, as well as other characters like the Baron de Binet and the bandits, who will later become more relevant as the story goes on. One thing that I realized is that a lot of the small talk actually helps Monte Cristo gather ideas for his revenge plan, to complement them and take them into action. The middle chunk of the book also establishes the ambiance and the rules of this world that we wouldn't immediately think about, because we don't live in 1830s Europe, right? And also we can see by sitting through the entire middle chunk that every single character is really connected amongst each other. There was also this one comment pretending to be woke about the fact that this book had slavery, huge age gaps, arranged marriages, dueling to the death to solve really minor issues, and the fact that social status mattered more than personal and familiar affairs. This book was written before the 1850s, and that's really all I have to say about that. I really recommend that every time you read a book, you read it keeping in mind that sometimes you have to do a little research to understand. And if you are too lazy to Google the historical context, no shame, I was way too lazy to Google the historical context personally. Give it the benefit of the doubt. Of course, you can always bring it up to light in recent events, to have social criticism, or maybe to relate certain values to modern society. But I feel like the most rational thing to do is consider the time a work was written before reading it. That same comment also said that Ali was described using the N-word, which I'd probably definitely blame on the translation, because in Romance languages the word literally means black and it is used as an adjective, as a color, just as Valentina's hands are described as white. The racist connotation was actually, I think, very proper of English speaking cultures, and especially the US. The N-word usage is probably the fault of your editorial. You have to decide what to do then if you're not going to support that publishing house anymore. But anyway, if you are not ready to commit to this novel, perhaps you shouldn't read it. I mean, I know what it's like to go into a book, and a long one at that, not motivated or not convinced, or constantly thinking about how tedious it's going to be to get through so many pages. It happened to me with Victoria Aveyard's King's Cage, which is right behind me right there. I keep it there because it's like the shameful part of the bookshelf, you know, the back over there, overshadowed by other books. So yeah, maybe the abridged version works for you, although I do think that omits Monte-Cristo's drug use, so do proceed at your own risk, I guess. I do believe that Dumas was considered the narrator by excellence during his time alive. His prose is beautiful and the description immerses you, and just the way he narrates the novel, switching between the omniscient narrator and the shock factor, which, by the way, there are a lot of plot twists and surprises in this book. Like, such a length, it gives, you know, the space for it. For me, it truly checks out as an adventure novel. A lot of those adventure elements, though, are present through a character's retelling of their origin story, which for me is a very, very rich resource to use, because it can take you to an entirely different country, time, an entirely different setting without actually leaving the story. It's so much better when you picture it in your mind and you see it as a movie, and I just fucking love this book. However, and despite all the good that I have to say about this novel, I recommend going into any work of fiction with zero expectations of what is going to happen. I usually do that with classics or with cult movies, and it's very, very useful for you to keep yourself open-minded. Sometimes the hype does kill your experience for a lot of things. For example, a restaurant can keep you always expectant for more, and perhaps if you had not known what to really expect of it, your opinion would have been different. But of course, this completely depends on preference as well. I just mentioned these Goodreads reviews, these Goodreads comments, because they were used as arguments to justify why objectively Monte-Cristo deserved a 1-star rating, when it really all came down to preference. For me, the world was fleshed out and expanded. Every single character had a story to tell and different motivations. There weren't inherently good and evil characters, but rather people with thoughts and different wants and needs that acted upon those, as well as their social status. This book has betrayal, poisonings, duels, romance, adventure. I think it truly deserves to be called one of the best classics of all time, and I really endlessly, thoroughly recommend it, even if you're starting out with the abridged version. Part 2. Discussion. Everything I say from now on will be full of spoilers, so please continue watching if you have already read the Count of Monte Cristo, or if you honestly don't care about spoilers. Preferably if you have read it unabridged, because I don't know which parts are taken out for the short version. It took me a while to come to terms with this book after I finished it. If you want to see my live reaction, you can watch my last weekly vlog. Overall, I was just shocked. I wasn't expecting to like this book as much as I had actually ended up doing. I really, honestly, I don't remember what I expected going into it. The only reason I started reading it was because I took it as a souvenir from my school's library. But fortunately, it was a good trip, honestly. My favorite characters in this book are in order as follows. First of all, Eugenie Danglars. I related to her character the most out of any other one in this book, especially her fondness for art and her thirst for independence, her sexual inclinations, of course, and her zero chill when it came to situations with her father and overall men. I will loosely translate some of my favorite quotes from her, and I've already have them written down on my notes because translating them live as I'm filming the video will probably be a lot more tedious. So excuse me if I look a lot at my notes. It's just I have them right here. In chapter 95, when she argues with her father, she compares life to an endless shipwreck where she throws out her useless baggage and decides to keep her will to live in independence. In the same page, she recognizes her virtues and extremely proudly asks her father that if she really is the best of the best, so pretty, so talented, so rich, why call her wretched or miserable, I believe, because she plans on leaving him. A little later, Danglars tells her his plans to escape because he is bankrupt, effectively, because Monte-Cristo's revenge is taking full effect. She refuses to tell her own plans to escape because, and I open quotations as accurately as I can, how could she be superior to him if, knowing his secret, she revealed hers? Honestly, that's just one of my favorite quotes in the entire book. And finally, during my favorite chapter, the Belgian route, I think, where she escapes with Louise d'Armilly, she tells her, oh my god, she tells her how men are all revolting and that she is glad to have motives to disdain them. And honestly, Eugenie is just such a mood. I just love how bold she is. She knows what she wants and she has no problem going against the current if that means leaving happy and free. My second favorite character has to be, of course, the Count of Monte Cristo himself, or Edmond Dantes, as well as his many different aliases. I really see myself in him, especially the revenge part and the perseverance to carry out his plans thoroughly. Honestly though, I'm not as patient as him because, well, he did spend a long time. I think he spent like 10 years planning his revenge. I also admire his resilience and the strategies that he used to harden himself. For example, when he witnessed all of the executions in the East so that he wouldn't be moved by his enemies' deaths back in Europe. Just the level of commitment also that he has to interpret all of these different characters in order to keep everything in control. Like when he had to change his identities to throw Villefort off when he was asking Monte-Cristo's real identity, and he actually just made up an entirely different new one, you know, Mrs. Saccoon. Also, his tact. He developed the ways of the ideal exotic gentleman, and ultimately he gives off this smart, gentle, wise image to anyone he comes across, really. And all of that could have only been accomplished by his ambition, which is something I really aspire for myself. However, I am not as deeply religious as Dante becomes throughout the entire book, and I quite honestly rolled my eyes every time that the divine providence and God were alluded to throughout the novel. One of my favorite scenes is right before the duel with Albert for the honor of the Morcerf family. Monte-Cristo realizes that he had not actually hardened his heart, but it was rather frozen and was starting to melt again because Mercedes actually convinces him to not kill her son. The resolution that he has at the end to let Albert kill him for his honor, not really minding that he would not get to witness his plan coming to a close. Those scenes were so beautifully written. They also show a more human side of Edmond rather than the Count of Monte Cristo. Also, the way he gets attached to Maximilian as though he were his own son, and how he decides to spare Valentina de Villefort even though she is one of her mortal enemy's daughter, just for the sake of their young love. That's absolutely beautiful. Honestly, I adored those scenes, and just the sentiment that I got while reading it. I felt for Edmond all the way through, celebrated his accomplishments. It is great development for a character who started out so innocent and boyish and just overall so pure to someone so illustrated and morally complicated and conflicted. It's also the ideal development as well, I believe, for a character. One of my favorite characters was Haiti. Oh god, honestly, she was just the shit. Everything she had, you know, she witnessed her father's betrayal. Afterwards, she was sold to slavery with her mother, who essentially died before her own eyes when she was a child. She later encounters her father's murderer when she recognizes Fernando at the opera. And then she goes on her own terms to testify against him in court, which honestly, I think that just she got a huge weight off her chest, bless her soul. Also, she does become extremely attached to Monte-Cristo to the point where she would kill herself if he died because she considered that she didn't have anything else to live for in the world. And when you look at that character and those motivations under today's light, you can see that she was definitely conceived under quite sexist ideas. I mean, she has drive and determination, I will give her that. The relationship of Monte-Cristo and Hailey did come to me as a surprise because I did see their relationship as more of a father and daughter kind of thing, but honestly, it's completely fine for me. She has incredible strength and she is not ashamed, and she's also quite extravagant, if I do say so myself. I mean, she loved wearing her diamonds and her silks and her robes, and it was just amazing to hear about. She's extremely smart. I mean, I think she spoke both ancient Greek, ancient Latin, and Italian, so props to her for being so smart and so extraordinary for her age, because I do believe she was pretty young. I think she was in her 20s or below her 20s. She was like 18. In a really modern story or adaptation, I can definitely see her as an activist, just a very headstrong woman. And if she were real and into girls, I definitely date her because she is one of my biggest literary crushes ever. Ali and Ave Faria were also some of my favorite characters, although they had very limited appearances. But one character that I really enjoyed reading about and that I really loved as a villain was Madame de Villefort, Eloise. God damn it. Okay, she was just iconic to start us off. I mean, she was straight up poisoning people left and right because she didn't want her own son to miss out on the family fortune. Like, she was actually really looking after her child. Even if you don't personally like her, you have to admit that she is a very promising, rich character. I think she was one of the female characters that most intrigued me. The breath of freshest air, because I think she was the only female character who was directly killing people, and one of the only characters who would actually kill people directly. She is insane. I mean, she does kill herself and her own son because a mother does not leave without her child. I think she is my favorite villain in the entire book, as well as ever. It is extremely satisfying as soon as you reach the last 200 pages, because that's when the entire revenge plan starts wrapping up. Morcerf has publicly been exposed and dishonored at this point. Danglars is on his way to being bankrupt and deceived by Benedetto, and also he's about to be left by his daughter and by his wife. Villefort has his own wife poisoning everybody in his family, his own daughter even, and Carl de Luz is already dead. Oh my god, I actually love Carl de Luz. He was just comic relief and very, very enjoyable character to read about, especially his character, not arc, but he just kind of went like this, you know. It's just he went from being a drunk to actually straight up killing somebody. My favorite outcome out of the four has to be Danglars, and that is actually the one that I was least satisfied about at first, but in the end, after meditating it, I came to the conclusion that he did get what he deserved. We have to keep in mind that I really hate Danglars. He was such a good villain that I hated him with my entire being. He was the one I resented the most, because essentially he was the one who had the truly selfish motives, in my opinion. Also, without him, because he was the mastermind behind the idea of throwing Dantes in jail, none of this would have ever happened. I think something amazing about what Monte-Cristo did to me as a novel is that as soon as I fully committed to it, I just got way too attached. I was so eager for it to end, and I felt like I wasn't flipping the page fast enough because I was just really immersed in the story at this point. But I also felt like a part of me would die once I closed this book, if that makes sense. I'd fallen in love with the characters, and my soul was there through each and every of their outcomes, and I just had these mixed feelings about the ending. Okay, I have to admit that my heart wasn't entirely with me as I read the last few pages in the last chapter. What I love the most about it, though, is a quote that kind of goes I don't know if Monte-Cristo will find peace, but he will definitely find happiness, which honestly, that wrapped up the entire thing for me. That was the closure that I needed as a reader and as a fan of this book. I'm honestly real satisfied with the way it ended, even though it wasn't what I really expected. But I mean, what can you seriously expect of such an epic read? Part 3, the movies. The movies, individually speaking, are amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed myself throughout every single one of them, and I can't honestly choose a favorite because I love them for different reasons and for different aspects of them. I enjoyed them both knowing the original story and also watching them as independent films. Of course, there are inconsistencies because there are way too many characters in this book and way too many scenes. They embrace the story pretty well and make it their own, and I think that's very hard to do, especially with such a timeless classic. I honestly cannot say the same for a lot of YA book to movie adaptations like The Maze Runner, which is one of my favorite YA series of all time. Personally, with my teenage criteria, think that a book to movie adaptation is way more than just recreating the basic plot and getting from point A to point B. You also have to be able to respect the source material and respect the world building, the characters and the roles that they played throughout the book to make the events happen. It's supposed to be easier with YA because YA, I think, is written specifically more manageable in scenes that you can choose to recreate, to modify, or just to entirely discard. Adaptation for a 90 to 120 minute maximum film is something I have to be really strategic about. TV shows I didn't want to watch for this video because I felt like I'd take a lot more time than I wanted, because I wanted to get this video out almost as soon as I finished the book. And I know that I said I was going to review Oldboy, but in and of itself, Oldboy is an entirely different thing. It's just taken inspiration from certain events of the book and certain themes like revenge, but it's really not at all that similar. But I'm just gonna review the 2002 film and the 1934 one. With that being said, let's go to the first movie, 1934. I'm gonna read my notes, I'm sorry. Starring Robert Dona as Edmond Dantes, Elisa Landi as Mercedes, whose last name they changed and I'm not really a fan of, Sidney Blackman as Fernando Mondego, to say the main characters of the story. It was directed by Roland Vili with a screenplay by him, Philip Dune, and Dan Todaro, inspired by the original text by Alexandre Dumas. It has an amazing score by Alfred Newman, which has to be my favorite thing out of the entire film. It's actually my notes. First thing, I love that there is a historical context a la Star Wars, even though Star Wars was released like years after that, but whatever. Because the book was written so close to the events that are referenced in it, we don't get context unless your edition has a prologue written specifically for it. It is really helpful for the historical context to be shown this way. It is definitely a very basic thing to add, but you have to keep in mind that not all of your audience has read the book, and also that they paid attention to their high school history class. Throughout the first part, it keeps itself pretty loyal to how the story went, and it really commits to setting up the events to how they went in the book. I adore the scene that Edmond has with Mercedes. It's just so romantic. I'm a sucker for these two, honestly, and I'm really happy whenever they have moments on screen. There are things that I just like already, like Mercedes having a mom, and the fact that Fernando is not established as her cousin right away, which I get that maybe it's to make it a little less incestuous, but this also explains why the events fly by so fast, because it's really trying to cover every event in the book as accurately as it can, and I really appreciate that effort. Also, Edmond realizes right away why he's taken to jail and if he didn't commit the crime, which does save us a lot of time and introduces the topic of revenge right away. And I get it, but it is something worth mentioning because I will come back to it when I review the second film.
Dangler's told you about Elba and the letter because he wanted to be captain. And you told the magistrate here because of Mercedes. You appear here as my friends.
I really love the wardrobe choices and the costume design. It is very reminiscent to what we imagine a French soldier would look like. And the outfits for the nobility and high society are just really eye candy for me. I don't know if they're historically accurate, but I personally really, really like them. Something that we will also see in the next film is how vicious they make Fernando to be. You know, just a cheating, lying scum of a man.
My son, you are now a Viscount.
But I don't want to be a Viscount. I want to be a sailor.
You'll be a Viscount on your father's side.
I got from what I read in the book that Fernando's character is he has really distinctive character traits that are shaped after his immense and undying love for Mercedes. He was, as Edmond, quite young and frankly really, really stupid. He didn't develop this selfishness and, like, I guess evil traits until after the Edmond thing weighed down on him, and we do see that reflected in the Ali Pasha situation. But you know, they did villainize him a lot more in these movies, which makes sense because we really do need to dislike him as an audience because he is one of the main antagonists. In this film, the main villain, I think, is Villefort. but they also make out Fernando to be like extremely hateable, which again we really don't have the time to establish all the psychological things that are going on. That's why I think it's understandable to have villainized him so much, but still the essence of his character, he's just a little more stupid, you know, not exactly that cynical. Both movies also handled Faria's death quite similarly by having rocks fall onto him as he was digging out the tunnel with Dantes, as opposed to the book where he gets a heart attack or cerebral palsy or something like that, which is how we get introduced to the venom that Monte-Cristo encourages Eloise de Villefort to try, as she in the venom that she actually uses to start poisoning everybody there. But I'm deviating a little bit. Faria's death didn't exactly fulfill what I was expecting, but I don't really have anything to complain about. It's fine, I don't mind it. For the run of foreign, or rather Eastern or Italian characters, I do get why they were combined with others, or why they replaced other minor roles. But for example, the introduction that we have in the book for Luigi Vampa, not where he kidnaps Albert, but Peppino backstory, that was one of the little story pieces that really brought the adventurous element to me. Naturally, I wasn't conforming when I saw that he was introduced as the smuggler captain that brings up Dantes on board after he escapes.
I'm Captain Vampa. We smuggle for a living.
Also, the fact that Ali was introduced right away, instead of giving him the more epic story, the more epic role, was rather disappointing for me, but that aspect I can overlook. Actually, speaking of Ali, I guess I can see why his character was so minor, because the USA in 1934 was still a pretty shit and racist place. I mean, that's the decade that introduced blackface as a performance aspect, you know, like as an entertainment art or something. Still, Ali plays such a great role, and that is why he's one of my favorite characters in the novel, because he can do basically anything if asked. He's not as present as I would have liked, and not as important. He was just that mute servant, when in reality he was the shit, like Haiti. Honestly, also Haiti was not very present the way that I would have liked her to be, but it's fine. Honestly, this adaptation was quite loyal to the source material relative to the other film. I love that Dante's little voiceover practically explained for dummies why he was taking certain measures to take revenge each specific antagonist.
I must attack them with the same weapons they've so viciously used against their countless enemies. Mondego with flattery, Danglars with money, de Villefort law. Well, now the late news.
I don't know, it was a nice touch. I was really excited when that happened, because I am pretty slow sometimes, so I appreciated it. Oh god, I really wanted to talk about the scene where Edmond as Monte-Cristo meets Mercedes, because it is one of my favorite scenes in the entire book. I think it's one of my favorite scenes. I have it tabbed in here.
Thank you for what you've done for my son.
I mean, Mercedes is the only one who is able to recognize Edmond, and she passes out. I just love that scene completely. I adore it, because it's just such an OTP moment. I don't know, it's just any scene with these two lovers absolutely melts my heart. I found it a little weird, for lack of a better term, that this interpretation of the story basically makes out Danglars and Villefort to be besties, when in reality I think that the only reason they mingled was because, one, Monte-Cristo was basically stirring the pot there, and two, they both had roles in the high society as noblemen, so I think that making them out to be best friends and conspiring together, I that was just a little weird to me for me to see, and it really threw me off. Which reminds me that Danglars' outcome was definitely outcome was definitely not satisfying, and it was not given the importance I would have personally given it. You know, the revenge aspect was more focused on Villefort, which was why the jury scene at the end was the conclusive one. But honestly, I just didn't really like the way it went down. The endings of both of these films heavily differ to the one of the source material, and replaced it with a really, really romantic ending, hence the iconic line of,
You find your own tree.
The ending just did not hold up to my expectations for it. But again, with a text this extensive, it's hard to keep everybody happy and to really, you know, stay true to it when you're deviating a lot and just keeping out a lot of the actual aspects of it. You know, it's a really long text, a lot of characters, lots of scenes. I get it, it's fine, happens all the time. Okay, sorry, my brother just arrived at home and I feel really uncomfortable filming. Okay, let's go. Let's do it. Now, on to the 2002 film starring the H.O.T. That was Honestly, it was like so Valley Girl of me. But James Caviezel as Edmond Dantes, fuck me up. Come on. You know, fucking walking work of art. Guy Pearce as Fernando Mondego, Dagmara Moisik, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, as Mercedes, and Henry Cavill as Albert. Why is this fucking cast so good looking? I don't know. I really appreciate it though. Love it. It was directed by Kevin Reynolds, and the screenplay was written by Jay Wolpert. And god damn it, this was such an amazing movie. Truly adventurous, but it unfortunately did not live up to the standard that I had for it. However, Reynolds' Monte-Cristo is one of the best movies I've ever seen. If we're talking about storytelling and photography, that is a movie adaptation. It is just below my standard. The movie also has historical context at the beginning, which I am grateful for again, and then shit goes wrong both in the movie and in my thoughts. First off, it is established right away that that Edmond and Fernando are best friends, which is not a choice I would have personally made, to be honest. They meet Napoleon in person because it is essentially Edmond's idea to disembark in Elba because their captain needs urgent medical care, and it is Napoleon himself who asks Edmond to deliver the letter. Again, not a choice I would have personally made. And also, both of these films make Fernando to be part of the crew when I don't think that was it. I think he was a fisherman, but in another different boat on the ferry. Oh, which by the way, yeah, something that I really liked about this film is that they made the actors pronounce the French names as they were.
Monsieur Danglars.
I am Armand D'Oliac, the warden of Chateau d'If.
The name is Clarion.
Boire encore une bouteille de vin.
Very, very satisfying for me, as French is my third language that I speak, and it was honestly really satisfying to see people speaking French. So yeah, it reached really high to make Fernando the main antagonist of this film because it essentially focuses its revenge aspect on both of these friends and their rivalry over Mercedes. It just establishes a really clear antagonist-villain line. Back to my point, it really focused on only Fernando's involvement instead of the collective work of all four. And Danglars, like, I can't stress this enough, I really hate this guy. The reason I brought this up is that I really didn't remember Fernando being that much of an alcoholic or an asshole overall.
What did he want?
I, however, out of the collection of scenes that make up this first part of the film, really appreciate the adventure element that happens right away in the beginning with the little gun down that they have with the soldiers at Elba. It was exciting, fun, dynamic. Loved it. I appreciated the fact that Edmond did have a father in this version, but I didn't love how his death was told. I'll come back to the scene that I'm going to be speaking about later, but you know, when Edmond comes back to ask Morel about what happened, again, we will come back to it later. This is a scene that really made me miss Cardelus because in the original book, Cardelus is the one who tells the story. Morel tells the story and he says that Dante's father hanged himself because of Edmond's treason. This is such a waste of this resource because the death that the father had in the book was so sorrowful. I mean, he starved himself because Edmond wasn't coming back, and he could have easily told the story in the script just the way that it was. I don't know what the point was in leaving it out. Probably wasn't the abridged version. I don't know. Don't care, just don't like the aspect really. Anyway, the scene where Edmond is taken to Villefort is a huge no-no for me because in the book, Edmond was such a gentleman and he was so, again, he is so pure. He was so certain of his innocence that he was just so calm throughout the entire thing. He was willingly taken and he just promised Mercedes that he would be back in time for them to sign the contract. However, I really did not like the impulse in which Edmond acted upon in the film because it really, you know, these characters, the essence of their characters was changed so that the story could be changed, if that makes some sense to you. Having said that, of course, I have mixed feelings about the Edmond and Fernando little duel scene that happened there. Again, it brought the really exciting, adventurous aspect that is the Count of Monte Cristo in itself. But I mean, it makes sense for the movie, but not as an adaptation, so I don't personally like it. But I mean, I don't appreciate the scene, but I liked it. Chateau d'If. God damn it, it's a torturous place. It is supposed to establish Edmond's deep hatred and desire for revenge in this movie, but the beatings just, they overdid it for me. Definitely forced sympathy for Edmond out of me, but that was not really the way that I would have wanted to care about his character. They added that element because they wanted to force sympathy out of you. Oh god, it's so uncomfortable. Again, I have mixed feelings for this scene. I can understand its purpose. I just wouldn't have personally added it in. Okay, Abbe Faria's character though. Oof. Okay, I really loved how versed and just the paternal energy he exudes. Great choice of casting. The actor did a great job at channeling Faria. I really pronounced that very American. Faria, yeah. Abbe Faria. Faria. His last name is Italian. Faria. Okay, great. I'm not very satisfied with the death because rocks fell on him again. But something that I realized I practically transcribed from the book was the scene where Faria helps Edmond realize who and why they imprisoned him, with what motives, who did it, you know.
The magistrate would burn evidence of a treasonous conspiracy and then imprison the only man who was aware of Monsieur Clarion's connection to that conspiracy.
He was protecting someone.
That scene was in the book and I really loved it because it showed how innocent and boyish Edmond really was. In the film, it didn't really come out that way, of course, because we already established that the essence of the character was changed, that the story could be changed, so not the same effect, but I really appreciated seeing that scene on the screen. I loved how Edmond was able to escape. It's something I didn't address in the discussion, but it is one of my favorite aspects in the book, you know, just how ingenious that answer was. It was just truly out of the box, and I love that both films kept that aspect pretty much intact. I mean, yes, how else would he escape Haslov if not like that, but just let me enjoy this aspect. Okay, there was a scene, this scene that it was the one that I wanted to come back to, that when he's in Morel's house and he comes back after he escapes, and just, I mean, Edmond just kind of raises his hood to see if Morel recognizes him, and it's I don't.
Zatara, you were a friend of Edmond.
Monsieur Morel?
Yes?
You knew Edmond also.
I died laughing because it's just such an awkward silence, and I just really want to have that scene tattooed in my brain. Something that I also realized about this film is that it is so lighthearted and funny at times. It has a great sense of humor, and that's something that I really appreciated of it as well. One of the biggest differences, which I think we can attribute to the limited time, is how Monte-Cristo is introduced to the French noble society. He sends out invitations left and right as soon as he arrives at Paris. There is nothing subtle at all of it, and then the big entrance, which further brings in the adventure element. I can't lie about that, but it is just so messy. Of course, there's not enough time for a 90-minute movie to do all the subtle work Monte-Cristo had to do to just very subtly slither into the society, into every single character's lives, and still make it look good and cohesive with the style of the film. Understandable, not a choice I would have personally made. I mean, I love Luis Guzman and how he said, the Count of Monte-Cristo.
His Grace, the Count of Monte-Cristo.
I love that shit. Anyway, oh, I almost forgot, actually, speaking of Luis Guzman, Jacopo. Okay, so Monte-Cristo has these 3 servants in the book, the loyal servants, right? And they kind of just replace them with Jacopo, who is not very prominent in the text as opposed to the 3 servants, Ali, Bertuccio, and Bautista. Don't get me wrong, I honestly really love Luis Guzman, and what he did with the character, it was so light and fresh, and I just loved it completely. He was certainly the comic relief of the entire film, but I mean, Parezco Disco Rayado, it's not a scene and it's not a choice that I would have personally made. Again, Vampa is made a smuggler and the captain of a smuggler ship, and for theatrical reasons made the bandit that he actually is in the book.
Many thanks, Your Grace.
And it's really such a shame. I mean, Vampa is a very interesting and enigmatic character in both the film and the book, so the essence wasn't changed all that much, and I appreciate that. Which brings me to the Italy scene. I seriously adored it. Albert is essentially the same character, just a lot younger, because it needs to make sense for the movie's plot twist. I mean, I think if you've already seen this film, you know the plot twist is not a personal choice. When I figured out why everything made sense, it was just like, oh, you know, like, I mean, as a film, it's great. It's just it's just not really true to the source material. But as I told you guys, as a film, great thing. As a movie adaptation, detail scene, very adventurous vibes, you know, when Monte-Cristo comes in and all of that shit. I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the connotation and playfulness after it happened, you know, to just see that everything is going according to plan, you know, little smile with Bampa. Great scene, loved it. Again, it's such a fun movie, and Henry Cavill is just so adorable. I can literally die. Okay, I enjoyed the film from here on, especially the scenes we have with Mercedes and how fond Albert becomes of Monte-Cristo, kind of replaced Maximilian. I get it. Danglars' death, I almost didn't get that scene. It took me a while to understand it. I had to pause the film. It's probably because I was taking notes at the same time I was watching. I'm not really reviewing anything past this point because this is where source material and movie adaptation completely part ways. It's not the same thing. I loved the ending in photography aspect and storytelling. I honestly really liked it. I didn't write notes for it because it wasn't anything like the book. Oh, also, you know, Danglars' death is so underrepresented. It's really unsatisfying to me. That ending is seriously one of the best things in the entire book. Just those 2 chapters of the entire revenge that they had on Danglars, great. And not seeing it on the screen, I would have loved to see it. My last comment is that I love the Mercedes in this film. I love how her essence was kept but amplified in the book. Although she is quite submissive and melancholic, you can see that Mercedes demonstrates selflessness and will go to extreme lengths to protect the people that she loves. This is the same case for the movie, just in such a bigger scale. You know, she takes a bullet wound. She's shameless too, and I love it. I love that she's incredibly smart and passionate in this film. A lot of my favorite characters were missing from both films, like the wives and the daughters. I think they played such a huge role in me loving this book because they were such smartly written characters. Now to lose, I mean, bring this man back. It was expected though, because it is a very short storytelling tool, you know, a film, 90 minute, 120 minute. I will watch the shows and animes because I really want to get these perspectives, especially the anime. I think it's getting good, so something like that. I really want to watch that. I'm really eager to. I really hope you loved this video. If you did, I'd be very grateful if you could comment anything about what you liked about this video, what you didn't like about it. I'm really open to suggestions, and I just want you guys to discuss Count of Monte Cristo with me because it is favorite book of all time, favorite classic of all time, and I would love to have people to talk about it with. I can't talk to anybody about it over here. Like, my family hasn't read it. They really are too lazy to read it because they're surprised that I took on this by myself. Honestly, I'm so surprised too. Anyway, hope you love this video, and I don't know how to outro. Bye.